Okay, looks like we're on. So welcome to the WOWD Ward 5 Council Forum. And I'm going to refrain from all of the information about the election. If you tuned in earlier, you would have caught that. Just a reminder that all that information is on the City of Tacoma Park website, and that you must vote separately for the City of Tacoma Park than for the gubernatorial election. For the Ward 5 seat, I'm joined by AJ Campbell, Cara, Honzak, and Yared Tebabu. And we have chosen straws to see who goes first, and in fact, it will go in that order. So, AJ, introduce yourself, please. Yes.
My name is AJ Campbell, and I'm a survivor of ovarian cancer and the Tacoma Park listservs. I've run a business here for 15 years. I raised my daughter here. I chose Tacoma Park. I grew up in Los Angeles, lived in New York, but Tacoma Park became my home. Here I cut oranges for Tacoma Park soccer. I made buns for ballet dancers when my daughter went to the local ballet school. I was a fundraiser for the PTA. I did box tops for education and giant A+ for students. I was a Girl Scout leader for many years. I helped students with special needs get IEPs from MCPS. I'm an author, I'm an activist, and I'm a playwright. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. Cara?
Hi, Eric. Thank you for your great moderation so far in all these forums. And hello, citizens of Ward 5 and Tacoma Park. It's really an honor to be on the stage with all of you, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today. We have not had, I don't think, 3 candidates running for Ward 5 since I can remember. I may be mistaken, but I've been in the neighborhood for 20 years. And I want to start out today's conversation just laying some cards on the table. If you compare me to some of the other candidates, at least one of the other candidates that's on the stage right now, I have not had the kind of active engagement in Tacoma Park's government over the last years that I have been here. However, I am running because I do have extremely deep ties and accountability to this community, and I think I understand exactly what a lot of the people living in my ward are living day to day, which is feeding 3 children, working intensely, and trying to make that juggle work. So I hope that you will see me as a fresh perspective, and I will bring all of my 20 years of professional acumen to bear on the job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yared?
All right, everyone. I'm Yared Babu. I was born and raised, well, not born, but raised, as far as I can remember, in Tacoma Park. I walk the streets of Maple to go to school. I have been engaged in all walks of life. I walk the jives of Maple Avenue. I've seen the community activism. I've seen the festivals. I've seen the folk, the whole community from every angle. And what brings me here now today is pretty simple. I'm a bit of a single issue candidate. I want to empower and engage the community, and I want to make sure there is an active dialogue between power and people. And that's why I'm here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to mix things up a little bit from, each forum will be a little bit different. I'm curious, we'll start with you, Cara. What made you decide that right now is hold on, I need to adjust the timing. Apologies for that. What made you decide that right now is the time for you to join the Tacoma Park City Council?
That's a really important question that a lot of people have been asking me after I've been living here for 20 years. First of all, I have an opportunity window right now in my personal life where I can give this kind of time, the kind that I think our ward deserves, to my ward. And it has been really difficult for me looking over the years because I think our ward doesn't have enough cohesion. We aren't really linked between single family households and renters, for example, and we are an extremely ethnically and culturally and linguistically diverse ward. And I'm not sure that we've ever, at least during my 20 years here, had anybody, for example, who speaks Spanish or Amharic, or who comes from any of the various communities besides some of the white single-family homeowners in our ward. So I am really looking forward to trying to bring that to bear right now in a time in our democracy and in our microcosm here in Takoma Park, where we do so many great social pilots and much more. We show the world what democracy can really look like, and I believe that I can help bring that to bear in our ward today.
Thank you, Cara. Yared?
So, my journey to this point is a bit different than most. This was not my plan in the long term. Rather, the opportunity was fielded to me, it was suggested. I was offered, it's possible to run for Ward 5 council member. Would you want to? And I had to think about that for a bit. And I kept asking myself, if I were to do this, why? What is the operative reason? Why would I do it? And what I kept coming back to was, I feel personally that there is not an accurate representation of Tacoma Park and its various demographics currently when it comes to governance. I mean, you can just look at the crowd over here. But even more than that, we don't have enough voters. There's not an awareness of how you can really interact with the government and how the government can really help you. And I want to help improve that with an active and dynamic engagement with a lot of the constituents. And so that's why I'm here now.
Thank you, Yared. AJ?
I wanted to run now because there's so many projects that I want to get done that I simply can't do as a private citizen. I certainly have influenced the city council enough times. I've spoken to the city council enough times. But there's some needs here that aren't being met. Ward 5 is about to go through some dynamic changes. The Purple Line is going to slam us with gentrification. The new community in Washington Adventist Hospital is going to fundamentally change the nature of Ward 5. We're going to have a brand new group of people moving in who are not traditionally affiliated with Tacoma Park, integrating them through social processes like festivals and whatnot will be important. And I don't hear anybody in the city talking about that. We need to take a look at some long-term things, and for example, like changing our rent stabilization laws in Ward 5. I mean, in the city, but as it applies to Ward 5. Extending leases, making changes, and we're just not doing it. So I'm going to try.
Thank you. Well, I want to follow up on AJ's point. Ward 5 is going to be largely affected by two major projects, more depending on how you break it up, but two major projects that the city has limited control over. So one is the Purple Line, and the other is the use of the Washington Adventist Hospital site. Yared, what are your thoughts on how you as a council member will seek influence in those two huge development projects?
Well, I think Ms. Campbell touched on the issue perfectly. It's no matter how things end, it's going to majorly affect Ward 5. And so the most important thing there, in my opinion, is making sure that the constituents are informed, that they understand what's happening, and they're engaged and their opinions are heard when it comes to what ultimately happens. I want to make sure that no matter how these developments go, that community health is ensured, that it's still the Tacoma Park we know and love, and even better and stronger for it. And so that would ultimately be my take on this affair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. AJ, we're back to you. And then we'll come to, okay, Cara.
Okay, thanks. You have touched on two issues that I see as the two major There are also two major reasons why I really thought I would like to run right now, because these issues are too big to just have us not coming together in our ward and tackling them together as much as possible and advocating for us as a ward. We are right as close as you can get to these developments than anybody else in the city. And yet, when, for example, they talked about the minor master plan, just 2 weeks ago at the city council meeting, and I think AJ also noted this. I mean, you can see just looking at who was surveyed, really only a small segment of our Ward 5 was actually surveyed in these crucial discussions about what's going to happen in the minor master plan affecting the hospital site. Now, I would say it seems to me that the Washington Adventist site is going to be developed through zoning primarily. That's the main impact that we can have as a city. So advocacy and collaboration are going to be vital for making that site be anything close to what the residents of our ward would like to see. I don't know how much impact we're really going to be able to have in that process, but the more that we can come together, the more we can show up, the better off we'll be. Now, on the Purple Line impacts, it is crucial, and I won't have much time to talk about this, but I just really want to see that we support our businesses and our housing. Sorry, I sold this up short. I'd like to come back to
We'll
that.
come back around.
Yeah.
AJ?
If you could split the two questions, because they're kind of the meat of what's going on if we could.
Sure. No, they are very
Like,
different.
come back around maybe to it and ask us to clarify.
Okay, so you mentioned the Purple Line, so let's start there, and everybody will get a chance to respond further.
Sure. So the Purple Line development is going to change Ward 5 for sure. The development at Ward 5 is going to be intense. We only have one corner where Beijing Delight is that's going to be available to Tacoma Park to really influence. It's in an opportunity zone or an enterprise zone, I believe. So there are some tax benefits, and I'd like to see us take control of the development. I have a project that I've been shopping around for about 2 years, and I can't even get meetings with the city about it. A mixed-use development, CRT, which is 65 feet, up to 65 feet, with retail on the bottom, and that's what I want to see there. And I think if we go and put out letters, request for interest on projects and take the lead on them and make sure that our values are put into that building, I think it'll go a long way. As far as the people that are going to be displaced, we have options. We can use our ability to license rental housing to fundamentally change the relationship between the renters and the landlords. We can have them offer 3-year leases, 2-year leases, longer. We can offer that kind of stabilization to the renters. But a lot of our houses are going to be bought up. They just are. There's absolutely, sorry. It's a big issue.
Yeah, we'll stay on this for a while, I think. And I want to recognize my error in sandwiching those two very different projects together. I want to make sure that we have enough time to address each of them separately. So we're moving on the Purple Line first then. So Yared, what are your thoughts then? AJ has raised the specter of gentrification. What are your thoughts on how you on the City Council would protect the current aspects of the community?
Well, I could speak in terms of my philosophy when it comes to approaching this. I'd really have to have my hands on the levers and pulleys, so to speak, to speak in terms of technicality. But going in, I would want to ensure that whatever development happens, that it isn't just turning Tacoma Park into a city, more or less. It's a bustling metropolis, so to speak. I want it to still keep it's a home to many people, and so personally, I believe that would mean curbing whatever shops, whatever businesses, whatever stores, whatever props up, whatever developments pop up in that area to the best of my ability to make sure it's still feasible to live there as, say, a lower income housing. And if that's not tenable, finding solutions by which people can still live within Tacoma Park and not be priced out, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. Cara, and again, we're starting from the premise that Tacoma Park does not have, the kinds of powers that the county and the state have.
Yeah, a key question, so everyone's touched on a few issues I also agree with. I think, but I'm going to focus on just two, the businesses that are at the corner there, but not just them, but how they connect to the rest of our ward, because it's just a straight shot down Flower, and we've got several empty businesses, even right there near the corner that everybody is aware of, the Amana restaurant that's still left empty right now. And there's another shop front just near the corner there that's also empty. These businesses, I have actually just recently, as I just started this candidacy recently, I walked into each and every business that is on that corner of Flower and Piney Branch. One of my first discoveries is that every single person that was in those shops preferred only to speak Spanish or could not speak English comfortably. I do speak Spanish, and of course the business owners are a different matter, but these are the managers and these are the people using these businesses. So what we need is, even if I am not the person chosen to represent our ward, we need some people who speak Spanish from the city to be working regularly with these businesses, the people that they serve, and all of the other businesses that are around that whole intersection that are going to be heavily impacted by the Purple Line development, to figure out what their real needs are. We should start with the business owners and the managers themselves, and we need to be systematic about it, and we need to help them and say, how can we help support you as a city to be protected?
Thank you. AJ, I think you weren't quite done talking about the Purple Line, and I don't know if you have any clarifying comments.
Well, sure. Ward 5 has been abandoned by the city as far as support goes. We have trade associations that deal with Main Street, downtown Ward 1, and then we have Ward 6, and Ward 5 has nothing. There is no trade association inside of Tacoma Park. And we've only recently started giving money to Discover Long Branch. And I don't know how much our businesses have actually benefited from that. And it's been, 2 or 3 years I've been after the city to create some kind of citywide trade association, some type of support that can help manage this process. In my plan for the development of the corner of Piney Branch and Flower that we talked about in Ward 5, it would include moving those businesses inside the format. I don't believe would have any net loss of businesses, and that would be part of it. But we'd need transition assistance, we'd need rebuilding, the equipment has to go somewhere and then has to come back in, and it also would include medical and dental in the basement, and residential too, as a matter of fact, because we need more affordable housing, but it would be affordable and affordable rich. Luxury as well.
Well, let's talk about housing, because that actually came up. So there's the business component, how businesses will be affected possibly by the Purple Line housing. How can Ward 5 continue to maintain affordable housing? Yared?
I would imagine a large part of that would be we have a limited amount of space in Ward 5, so ultimately the biggest end goal would be to, if in the worst case scenario where people are pushed out of their homes, are pushed out of the buildings we have currently, especially the lower income apartments that are along Flower, I would want to prioritize building higher, building bigger, more room, denser, up to standards, of course, affordable housing. That would be the goal in the long term, but in the interim, it would be forestalling the worst case of people getting pushed out until we can figure out an ideal plan for them.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Yared? What, as a council member, what intervention would you take to forestall people being pushed out?
I imagine a large part of it would be an active conversation with the parties involved with the development around the, oh, you started the timer a little bit early, or late, that's fine. But a bit of an active dialogue with people in charge of development of the Purple Line, city, the state, so on and so forth. And it would be a dialogue. It would be figuring out the requirements, what would be possible, what would be feasible. I don't have any concrete plans per se, but I know that would be my immediate priority and my goal, pushing forward. These people can't be forgotten. This is their home as much as it is ours. And so it would require every piece of attention.
Thank you, Yared. Cara?
I will admit that I am still learning a lot of the ins and outs of what powers the city has, to control any given building or any block of developments. I think there are quite a few different models that are going on within the ward, actually. So, but I think it's critical, actually, that we wrap our heads around this in depth with a lot of data and a lot of really vital information. But I think it's also refreshing to hear. I think we all know the number of city residents has not grown in a long time. There are only a few ways to grow the number of residents. We're going to have to go up. If we want to be smart and we want to keep our green space, we're going to have to go up. And that's not necessarily going to be a bad thing for anybody who's not excited about that. I know there's been a lot of resistance typically, but I think that we do need to go up and still try to maintain the character of our city or whatever other values we agree on among the city. But that's smart development near a transit zone, and that's the way to enable us to improve the quality of housing for those. Right now, there are a lot of people in our ward who are not getting the kind of quality housing that they deserve, and we've got to find a balance somehow between rent stabilization and high quality housing that gets maintained. We have a lot of, I'm sorry to call them this, but slum landlords right now in our ward, and I'm sure across the city, but it really affects our residents. And I heard some terrible tales just as I was walking around door to door this past few weekends. And I think we're missing a middle. So along the transit line, we can build some middle income housing as well, mixed income housing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. AJ?
So in Ward 5, but other parts of the city, we've had about 50 multifamily buildings flip for sale recently. The city hasn't, in almost all of the cases, except for two, exerted its right to purchase and put together a plan for an affordable housing building. There's one on Flower, not far between Washington Adventist and, say, like Monsecunda, right? The city just hasn't done that. And a lot of the people that are flipping are doing it for investing ahead of the Purple Line. The reason the Mana building hasn't been developed, for example, is because, as they've said, they're holding on to it until the property values go up. A lot of landlords are looking at that. They're not expanding at the moment. They're holding on until the Purple Line is definite, and we have an open date, and then everything's going to break loose. The only new place we can put affordable housing is going to be on either old buildings that we convert through an MHP partnership, think like the Hillwood Manor, or at the Washington Adventist site. But I caution trying to make the Washington Adventist site everything that putting all our hopes there. We might be sorely disappointed at what we get.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the Washington Adventist site. Right now, we're at the moment where that site is a little bit like the room of requirement. Some of you will understand that reference. So, what are your thoughts? And we'll start with you, Cara, on how Takoma Park can leverage the best opportunity out of that site, which at one time served us as our hospital.
Well, as I think we've all been saying, there's only so much that we can do, but powerlessness is not what we need right now. We need a city council person who's going to do more than just regulate and say zoning is all we can do. We're going to need serious advocacy for the people of our ward and for our city at large about what can be on that site, but mostly for who is participating and how in that process. I think that we're one of the only neighborhoods that doesn't have associations except in Essex House and some other really small ones. We can build sort of, if you will, pseudo associations in the time being so that we can actively participate and have representation. But we're going to need to do that, say, beyond the listserv, which is an important way for our neighborhood at the moment to communicate. We're going to need to go out door to door and really do what I'm sure my fellow candidates up here have been doing it with me, telling people there's a meeting, for example, next Tuesday on visioning, and getting people to show up. But we need to try to convince also the group that is managing this city-county engagement process to come out to our ward and not to Piney Branch Elementary School. You would not believe that many people actually said, "Where is Piney Branch?" Because that's not even our home school. People don't even know where it is. That may come as a total shock to the rest of Takoma Park, but that's what we have to do. We've got to bring it home, and we've got to get them. Yared said it at the last meeting. Come to our ward, please. Have informal meetings.
Thank you. AJ?
So the Montgomery County Planning did have a meeting with Ward 5. I was on the Zoom call. All of our feedback to them was not included in their final presentation. It just wasn't. It was completely overlooked. When they sampled people in the city about their opinions about WAU site development, like what kind of zoning, did they want it to look like Bethesda or a row of townhomes, and like what did they want? It was just, Ward 1 was completely oversampled, and Ward 5's feedback was evaporated. So they haven't even really asked us. My ambitions for the site are, whether we end up with a commercial, like a 5-story commercial Bethesda-like development, or townhomes, or some variation of that. My main concern is that we don't have developers swooping in to purchase the properties and for the purpose of renting high and then flipping. I'm concerned about the socialization of the new members. I'm concerned about many things, but there's not a lot we can control in the process. We just have zoning. We just do. But we can make deals, and I personally would like to see a ginormous community pool there, indoor, outdoor, something that could bring us all together into the ward. That would be my remove requirement idea.
Thank you, AJ. Yared?
So in some senses, my fellow candidates have taken some of the words out of my mouth. I believe, first and foremost, it would be very, very important to make sure that the opinions of everyone is heard. I would want to understand the options we have for development and then field those to the constituents. Personally, my aspirations, the ideal dream state, I would want whatever development occurs at the hospital site to both empower the community and add some texture, add some value to Ward 5, whether that's from in housing or local businesses that up the value, it doesn't matter. But what's most important is that we still stay Tacoma Park, we still stay homely and pleasant, so to speak.
Thank you. Yes, Cara.
I just want to add something, and maybe my fellow candidates would like to too. I have been very disappointed that it doesn't appear that there's been really heavy engagement with the Adventists who are really going to decide what's going to go on that site, and in general, I know there's been a terrible relationship. Maybe terrible is not the right way to characterize it. A relationship that has not been very functional between the neighborhood and both the hospital and the university. As nice as many people may be, and as well-intentioned as people may be, they're sort of a closed community in some ways of the university, and we, even if it's totally had a terrible history and it's very difficult, I mean, we need somebody like the city council person to advocate, and be super collaborative as much as possible, even when trust might get broken over and again. But just say, hey, what are you up to? What are you thinking? What's the next step? To what degree are you planning, and when are you planning to listen to this, to these plans? Are you at all of the meetings? I think they're only having monthly meetings at the moment, and it's this generic Adventist group Who's there? Who's at these meetings? Is it really the people who are really going to make these decisions?
Thank you. AJ?
Well, if the city is meeting with Washington Adventist community and they're not including us, that's the city's problem. They should be including us. They should be allowing us to Zoom in or watch it in the form of a webinar or just keep up with it. I don't see why these meetings should be secret, and clearly that's what they are.
Yared, anything to add?
Nothing in particular. I agree with my fellow candidates. I think even in the worst case, we as a Ward 5 need to be heard, and if they aren't willing to hear us, then we need to collectively work together to make sure that they understand that we care, that this is our home.
Thank you. There has been, it has been explicitly said in some recent community meetings that members of our community who do not speak English as their first language and members of our community who rent often feel disengaged from the city. One word that I saw was unwelcome. So, AJ, we'll turn to you first. What steps will you take to make sure that all of your constituents feel welcome and feel engaged and as if they are stakeholders in the city?
So in our city, we have very few ways to interact with the government, right? So if you want to be active, politically active, you show up and watch the city council meetings, or maybe you join a committee. And that just doesn't work for everyone. That's the way we're telling people to interact with us. And I think that's got to stop. I think we have to have more ways for people to come and be part. Like we have no way to fund smaller projects or smaller festivals or things like the person on the Ward 1 panel said she had a great idea for a wonderful festival, and then there was no way to develop it. We need to have ways to do that so that there's alternate ways of people interacting and therefore becoming more engaged. Because when you're more engaged, you tend to vote, you tend to show up, you tend to add to the community, and you tend to feel included. And we just don't have a way to do that. I mean, not everybody wants to sit on a Tuesday night in the hydrangea room and listen to, a whole bunch of people go on. It's not for everyone, and we've just failed to realize that,
Thank you, AJ. Yared?
So this is a question I hold very near and dear. In fact, it's the very part of the core of why I'm running in the first place. In my childhood home of the Essex House, for instance, there have been many occasions in which the people have felt that they have been unheard, they've been untouched, not paid attention to, and there's a general sense of distance from Maple to here. I mean, and it's honestly, in my opinion, it's very, very simple. You just take government to them. For instance, in my kickoff, we just held a little event, a small little coffee ceremony inside the lounge, and just let people come by, talk with them, hear what they cared about. People are concerned about security there. They want security cameras in the parking lot. They want more protections for their own packages. Very simple but important things, quality of life. In my experience, honestly, people just need to feel like they'll be listened to. You don't need, community events, I definitely agree with you, Ms. Campbell, are very important. I want to, because you build community, you bring people together. But ultimately, it's as simple as one of my campaign promises are, door knocking past just being elected, just continually talking with people, talking to community leaders such as Jackie Frazier, and making sure that wherever it is, people are being heard.
Thank you. Cara?
I want to build on something that Yared touched on. I don't think people in my ward I think some people in our ward who are not in Essex House don't realize some of the amazing work that was done through Lunch and Learn. One of the things that really spoke to me that Jackie told me about is how through the Lunch and Learn program based out of Essex House, and then there were significant efforts to educate citizens, many of whom I understand are Ethiopian or of Ethiopian descent in that building, and other cultures, but that's true throughout our ward, on how to civically engage. My own husband is from the Czech Republic. I met him living here 20 years ago in this community. He wasn't a legal resident. Wasn't a resident yet or a citizen. He was just living here on a visa, working, and he grew up under communism and doesn't know either that much about how it's supposed to work. We need to educate our citizens through fora that put up voting booths like they did at Lunch and Learn, show young people how voting really works, show them what you do. What's the next step after voting? You can go and volunteer at the polls. Here's what you're expected to do for good civic engagement. But this isn't something you're born knowing unless you've grown up in a society where that was normal. And people are excited to live in a place where government is accountable. But we have to demonstrate how that works, and in languages and at the places where people are really living, make it extremely accessible. Maybe do some of it through our local schools, which are as different from Takoma Park Elementary and Piney Branch and Tacoma Middle.
Thank you. Ms. AJ?
As part of my campaigning, I created a community guide, AJ's community guide, and it had a lot of engagement, points of engagement. So like on voting, how do you get your kid into Tacoma Park soccer? How do you get free or discounted internet? And people have been so grateful for that level of information. It just blew me out. Like, I don't understand how our city government isn't already doing all of these outreach efforts, but clearly they're not. If people in Essex House who have to pay for their internet, which blows my mind that the landlord isn't required to provide that, they're not taking advantage of every single discount program available through internet or rather extensive scholarship programs in Maryland. I have no idea what the city is doing. That should be job one. That should be the thing we're doing the most of. It's easy and it's outreach. It's just basic outreach. And of course it should be in the language they can understand, but we need to do a lot better because there's so many resources that aren't being used. And I don't get it.
Thank you. And Yared, you have a chance to clarify in any way specifically, what you will do as council member to, bridge these gaps.
Well, I think a large part of it, Mrs. Campbell touched upon the issue. It's difficult to set up these large, wide-sweeping events. I think then the best way moving forward is a bit of what Ms. Honzak was touching into, of just community empowerment. My goal isn't necessarily just to be in their face. It's to help guide them towards really coming here themselves and participating. I think that in that regard, the idea of helping community leaders rise to prominence and really work together with everyone to push forward their vision is my dream end state, my dream end goal, as it were.
Thank you. Cara?
Yeah, a few specifics on, I think, things. I mentioned a couple with the schools, but we can see if there's budget for more translations locally in neighborhoods. For example, I had to ask some people to help me translate in Amharic some of the basic materials that I'm producing, but that's my campaign. But once somebody's representing a ward, can they get those kinds of resources to, let's say, produce a monthly newsletter in at least two dominant languages besides English that are in their ward? I don't think we have those resources right now. Jessie Carpenter herself said, why can't we translate the Takoma Park newsletter into multiple languages just like they do in Hyattsville? Let's think about that. Is that a good place for our dollars to go? Also, we don't have postage-paid envelopes for our voter registration forms. I found that very troubling when I went out and tried to convince people who are already afraid to register to vote in the Spanish-speaking community here that they should, and it's quite a trek for them to get over to the community center and bring their voter registration. So it needs to be in Spanish, and can we afford to do some postage-paid envelopes? That doesn't seem like a big lift to me. And maybe that's not the way. Maybe we can actually have our city staff come out to some of the buildings and start registering voters physically right there on the premise at various spots where we have low voter registration. I think that would be fantastic and go a long way with people who speak other languages also on board. Those are a few things I'd do.
Thank you. Yared, I want to pick up on Cara actually anticipated a point I wanted to get to, which is how will you communicate with your constituents and how often?
There we go. My goal would be to do, on a monthly basis, a sort of community meet in various circles. It wouldn't be, I would want to, the details of it would have to be meted out, but ideally I would want to touch most communities in a bi-monthly basis at the very most. I would specifically, and that's why I touched on to the whole idea of empowering community leaders. You bunch people up into groups, they're easier to break down. But even beyond that, I believe in, let's say, every 4 months, just a door-knocking campaign of touching up on people, seeing how they feel about things. Ward 5 is a very walkable. I can personally walk along it in, say, at most 2 hours. It's very feasible to just do it on a ground level, talking to people. And I think that it doesn't have to be too complicated. It's just conversation, ultimately.
Thank you. And actually, back to you, Cara, then we'll get to AJ.
Okay, I think we all are sitting here, and anybody in the audience knows communication has been a problem, a big problem for many years. Many residents would like to see more communication, and of course, it's not easy to achieve. I don't totally agree, actually, that it's easy. It takes me to have meaningful conversations with anybody, and people want to talk because I don't get talked to very often. I mean, it can take me an hour to walk about 4 or 5 houses down. That's how it's going right now, and it's not easy to get into the buildings and talk to people. So what we need is multimodal strategies. I would like to see whoever takes this role, if it's me, be systematic about gathering how do you want to hear information, in what language, how frequently, how short and brief, on what days of the week. That kind of information, we can first try to gather that, and then make sure that we are, on whatever basis, we're delivering information and feedback on the listserv. We're doing Zoom presentations on some sort of periodicity, doing them in different languages if possible, if we can get enough resources, and then of course doing door to door, I think, on some sort of periodicity as much as possible. And if we can get volunteers from the neighborhood to do that with us, that will go a lot farther and a lot faster. This is supposed to be a part-time job, but it takes a lot of time to do those things. But I think whoever takes this position has got to commit themselves to regular communication.
Great. Thank you. AJ?
Yeah, I'm already doing that. We already have community meetings. I already do meeting summaries after every important meeting that we have. So that's sort of already done. The city has a bigger problem with communicating with its citizens for everything. Every single public space management plan or minor master plan, we all go out and people knock on doors and try to survey the residents. As a city, we need a better way of doing it because we are paying consultants a huge amount of money to duplicate the same work, essentially. And so I think the city should invest in a really good contact management system. And I honestly don't know why we don't have one. A way to send out voice messages that could be auto-responsive, to follow up when people haven't responded. We could do touch-tone surveys. There's a lot of things we could do. We just aren't doing it. And right now we're doing it in the most expensive way possible over and over and over. We can do mailings. We can do all of that. We can reach out to tenant groups and other groups. But we have a bigger problem, and we probably should deal with it in the context of that. But we can still have our meetings, and I can still do the meeting summaries, and that's wonderful. I'd love to keep doing that, if you'll let me.
Thank you. I don't want to sound like I'm beating a dead metaphor, but it's my perception that wards 1, 2, and 3 have tend to have the council's ear to a greater degree. Much of that has to do with, what we've talked about already in terms of engagement at city council. So, Cara, can you talk about how you as representative of Ward 5 will represent your constituents so that they have a greater voice in the city?
I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. We don't have that kind of power at the moment. I think one good strategy, of course, is to build those networks as quickly as humanly possible with all of the other representatives from the other from the other wards. I think those relationships can go a long way, especially if they're done in a way of trust and collaboration. I think that's something that I can promise to do very well at. It's part of what I've been doing for a lot of years. But I also think we are going to need to use information, real data and information and evidence as much as we're able to gather it and bring it together as a neighborhood and from other sources if we can, to say, look, this is what the data shows. This shows how we are not getting the attention that the other wards are getting. This is how the numbers work out. This is what we are and are not getting, and really lay that case out so it's not an emotional case. It's a very black and white and clear situation, not saying you don't care about us, but look, this is what we could do, this is what we should do to be equitable. And I would really like to see more of that kind of dialogue happening.
Thank you. AJ?
Most of the votes of the city are in 1, 2, and 3. If you're running for mayor, you're going to pay most of your attention towards 1, 2, and 3, rightly or wrongly. That's it. That's what happens. Nothing will change in Ward 5 until we get more voters. I can talk all about it all day long about what I think we should do. But it comes down to registering voters, getting them to show up, making us the powerhouse that we will be once we add the only new development in Takoma Park in how many years? And the Purple Line. It'll fundamentally change us.
Okay. Thank you, AJ. Yared?
I personally agree with my fellow candidates over here. I think that ultimately it falls down to making sure that not only we engage the people, but we empower them to come and bring their voice to us. Government cannot represent unless it hears the voice of the people. And I think that comes in multiple facets. I agree voting is a major priority. I would also like to help people come here as well and speak their mind, make sure they are heard from all demographics, all groups. And yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Cara?
I don't want to be too sappy and say we agree on everything, but I do want to say that the first time we all met in this room in the nomination meeting, we all agreed that our number one priority was to get voters registered. So I know for a fact that our teams have all been probably walking around handing out voter registration and educating people on their rights. So that is something that I hope we can do a lot more of even after this race is finished.
Every piece of my literature has links to voting. It has a QR code so you can do it with your phone. Ward 5 had 300 votes last time, 300, and the time before that, 150 out of the 1,300 registered voters. We have to, that's the change that has to happen. So.
Would you like to add anything, Yared?
I'll just like to add that the chief goal of my campaign, above anything else, is just that engagement. I want to help people realize that how much power they can have in influencing things if they just take that step forward. And so I'm very much endeared that my fellow competitors, quote unquote, feel the same as I do.
Thank you. AJ, I want to talk about our climate policy. As we all know, 2035 is the year that the city has identified as our goal for achieving net zero carbon emissions. Many popular climate change adaptations are easier to achieve for people of means. How can you as a council member respond urgently to the climate crisis with an eye toward racial and economic equity?
We have an aging infrastructure of low-income housing in Ward 5 specifically. Think the lower brick buildings would be a great example. Those are extremely prone to flooding. Uphill properties discharging stormwater down to lower properties, which tend to be lower income. They just tend to be. We're not doing enough. We have no real way as a city for me to go. If like my upstream neighbor is complaining, is discharging water downhill, I have no way to go to the city and say, help me fix it, right? We don't have any cross-boundary way of dealing with any issues. My concern is that even if we were to develop a way, that all the money would get sucked into wards 1, 2, and 3, and we wouldn't get as much. I think it's very easy for someone of means to put together a strong proposal for help and equity, or hire a expert, for example, and people who are struggling to get by on a fixed income don't have means of, who can write a $2,500 check to a water manager or a stormwater manager, are going to have any hope. They're just not, and the city has to step in and do something. I want to be able to go and put apply for an overview or a study to be done across boundaries on properties.
Thank you. Yared?
It's a very difficult answer, the question you just asked, and unfortunately, I don't believe I have the surefire answer for you quite yet. I could say a number of things, but Ms. Campbell has touched upon the fact that resources, especially now that we're in a deficit, are limited. So I think whatever we choose, it'll require a lot of serious, in-depth thinking and studying on how these sorts of problems are solved elsewhere in the United States. And I think it's going to be an active process, and one of the biggest difficulties we'll be facing here in our run, whichever one of us is elected.
Thank you. Cara?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. We have this policy, but I think it's really important. Now, I do have a background in climate, so I have the benefit of that, but we also have a ton of experts in this city on climate change and resilience and mitigation. But I think it's really important, actually, as we talk about climate in the city, that we separate mitigation conversations from resilience building. Mitigation efforts, and I'm pretty sure most of the people listening to this know what I'm talking about, so I'm not going to explain that. But for mitigation, that is going to have very difficult financial impacts on those who don't have the means if they're expected to adhere to a 2035 deadline in a building, for example. That has me concerned about whether or not we have the financial means when we have a big deficit to be able to achieve that. Also, having worked in this field myself, I will say there is no way we're going to ever achieve this as a city, almost certainly not through just straight up, replacing stoves and putting in electrical vehicles. It's not realistic. That part of it is not realistic unless we are leveraging massive partnerships up and down the chain, up the chain really, to the state and the federal government and beyond, and nonprofits to bring resources to the city to bear to meet our goal. And I think it's maybe more important, especially if we're talking about equity, which I think is central to Takoma Park's heart and soul, that we focus on resilience. Sorry, I ran out of time.
Thank you. AJ, any further thoughts on Tacoma Park's response to climate change?
I just don't see, honestly, how we're going to meet any of the goals. I think they're ambitious. But I just don't see how we're connecting. We're still buying gas-powered cars for the city fleet, where the library is has a bigger footprint, but not enough, not a high enough standard of what am I talking? What's the
LEED?
LEED standard? Yeah, sorry. The LEED standard was met as an afterthought. We're just not taking it seriously. We talk about it a lot. In the same way that we talk about, big policy ideas, but I don't see a lot of specific actions. And we have too many older buildings here, in Ward 5 specifically, that are just not going to be retrofit. There's no one who's going to come in and refurbish these buildings with our current policy process. And, our biggest new challenge is going to be getting EV charging at the multifamily buildings or curbside. And I don't see any real movement from the city on that. Montgomery County's making some movements and there's some money available, but there's nobody to coordinate it. I don't know how we get to where our goals are. It's like our strategic goals are great, but our tactical goals are almost non-existent. So I would like to really see a bigger connection between the two.
Great, thank you. And let's, I know, well, Cara, you were cut off, so let's let Yared and then Cara, if you have any additional thoughts on this topic.
I suppose the only thing I would have to add is right now we find ourselves in a point where we're torn between a few directions. And ultimately, I do agree with Ms. Campbell. We're not going to be able to achieve our ideal state in the foreseeable future. But no matter what, even if we're taking that tiny step forward, setting up for the future, I want to advance. I want to make progress on the climate issue and set up this Tacoma Park for success no matter what happens.
Thank you, Yared. Cara?
I think it's a really ambitious vision, and I think it's great that we have it. This is, it needs to happen all over the world. So we should be a place that has that as a vision. And we should be a place where we are trying to experiment to the best of our ability. And I think that's what we're after. We are trying as a city to say, can we do it? So let's find some win-win solutions wherever they are feasible, and let's go for it. I mean, we've got it in place, but we do need to put up some indicators, some measures, and prioritize what are those win-wins, especially with respect to resilience and equity issues. So, for example, I would say, to me, it's a much, much higher priority that we are focused, and I know some people aren't going to like what I'm about to say, but that we're maybe not, I'm not sure, I'm not yet convinced about whether the library is in a floodplain to such a degree that we need to put a lot of money into that. I'm not sure, but show me. I want to listen to the data. But I do believe we need to be really focused on heat zones in the city because that kills people. We need to be ready for the next big storm, and we need to prepare our zones where we don't have trees for people to stand in the shade. We need to make sure everybody's got access to emergency cooling areas for the next big storm when we have big power outages. Do we have all of these pieces in place to protect all of our citizens? Because that doesn't even affect just the vulnerable, it affects everybody.
Sure, AJ.
If the library's not in a floodplain, then we're paying way too much money for it. I think even the build on the community center, a lot of the funds went for the whole moat idea, the 100-year wall. I mean, but if it's not true, then we have a really big problem because all the added extra expense, and well, not all of it, because some of it is actually being mitigated, but is going to be put into the community center, big part of it. But it has to be. Like, either that or somebody's lying to us.
No, and I am not suggesting that anyone is lying. I just think we need to dig through that data and make sure that is the best place to expend our climate energy and funds.
But haven't that already been done?
I maybe I'm not well enough informed.
Okay.
Okay, let's, okay, great. The issue of the budget came up, and the fact that Tacoma Park is is running on a deficit, and suggestions have been made by other candidates to hold the line on taxes, maybe even lower taxes. So, Yared, I wonder what your thoughts are on the Tacoma Park property tax rate, and if we do cut taxes, what services would we need to cut?
So I think this is a multi-step process. First, I'd want to really census the community and understand how much we value the varying services we provide. And moving forward from there, if it would at all be feasible to cut them. I would rather avoid cutting property taxes for the very obvious reasons that we are in a deficit right now. But I think no matter what, we need to pay attention to those in need, those who are struggling very much so, and make accommodations for them before we consider major cuts, because a deficit isn't going to solve itself. And until we have ways to grow our income as a city, we're stuck here.
Thank you. Cara?
You know, I having watched the mayor debates in particular and seeing our mayor candidates grappling with this issue, it's not easy to sit up on the stage and say, what do you think we should cut? And I don't think anybody here has the information yet to be able to say that. However, I do think we need to be very systematic about it and very prudent. I am very concerned about our fiscal health. We're not going to any better place anytime soon, given inflation and such. I think that it's important that property owners, including myself, are paying our fair share, at least keeping up. But I think in general we have been with inflation, and I also think we need to be thinking about other ways to transfer resources rather than thinking, initially about cutting. How are we going to transfer more resources into Takoma Park? Through sales taxes that come from, let's say, other communities coming in and buying stuff in our community, but also through other transfers of funding from county, from federal, from state funds to support us as we've gotten the ARPA dollars. I think there are a lot of other ways that where we're not getting necessarily our fair share of those transfers, and we need to, and yet we are housing a lot of people at a rate that they can afford and providing them with high quality services. So I think it's important that we explore all of that before we start cutting big chunks.
Thank you. AJ?
Oh, this is my favorite question. Absolutely favorite question. I can find you $1 million right now that we can cut from our budget. Kill the temporary location for the library. Buy a bookmobile. Schlep it around, move it around the city, get some Wi-Fi, set up some places for computers in smaller zones, create a couple smaller pop-up libraries. The way we spend money around here does not make any sense to me. The temporary library location costs us $20,000 a month. $17,000 in rent, $2,000 in operating expenses. That's going to be over 3 years. It's completely unnecessary. We can accomplish everything with a bookmobile, some outreach, and a little ingenuity. But we get stuck in the city with we have to do things exactly one way. There's not a lot of, as I call it, lateral thinking, creative thinking, out of the box thinking, and there's certainly no idea of economy. We spend so much money on consultants. We could cut down a lot of that by investing in our staff so that they can do some of the work. For example, the $50,000 we totally blew on redistricting. There was absolutely no reason that we had to do that. We could have had our staff trained up how to do it, and instead we decided to farm it out to a consultant. It's completely unnecessary.
Yared, any follow-up or other comments on how we can either cut expenses or raise revenue in the city?
I would like to add that when it comes to solutions towards our lack of income, so to speak, a big consideration for me personally would be encouraging the development of local businesses in the area, for the simple reason of the more businesses we have operating here, the more taxes we have flowing into us. If we can build denser and better, then that'll naturally inflate our expenses, so to speak. But when it comes to Mrs. Honzak or Ms. Campbell's points on optimizing our budget, I very much agree that we do need to look internally and figure out, is there any expenses that we can cut, or are we using the money the best way we can in that process?
Thank you.
By twisting the question just a little bit, because I've already spoken to the cuts, but AJ touched on something really important. I love this idea of the roving libraries. I also want to point out that in Ward 5, the large majority of the people who go there do not use regularly the Takoma Park Library. That is not the direction of travel for most of the residents. They go to Sims Middle School, where my children go. They also go to Rolling Terrace Elementary School for books for their children regularly. They don't go there after school. They also don't use it as an aftercare facility usually because they're going a different direction. They're having to find other ways. And a big, huge issue that has been in the mayoral race is, and I've seen it with my own eyes because I had some kids go to Takoma Park Elementary, the library is used as an after-school child care free place for kids to go, safe place for kids to go. That's fantastic. But, and therefore, we've got a temporary space of a library that's somewhere else. Is that still helping in that way? I'm not convinced about that. But we do need to figure out child care issues and where there's a nexus with libraries. Why not take out the box and use those library spaces in the school? If this can augment with our dollars, care is low cost and price kind of major in our ward. People have child care now. Some are not able to go back to work for that reason.
While we're still I did with library director, and there was no travel estimation made for people who don't have, so bus, walking, for any part of the city. So before they decided to put the library where it is now, or temporary New Avenue, that's the old Salvation Army building, in case you guys haven't heard, they didn't study the map. They didn't Google map to figure out that it takes 25 minutes or almost an hour from to that library. Now, I can't imagine doing that with kids and a stroller. There's just no way people aren't using it. Made sense. It never meant to be done. It's going to be by people who live right around it, which is great. Still could be a bookmobile or a pop-up location at the center. And it's not going to be used by anybody else, but here we are.
Thank you. While we're talking over to safety a little bit, to maintain own, and I think we come to you first. That police provides the safety value coherent with this community, both in a budgetary sense and also from a sense of social and racial economic justice?
That's a big question. Okay, now I don't think I'm equipped to answer whether it's a full value. What I can say is that most residents I know deeply value, including myself, deeply value the relationship we have with our police force here, that we all believe, at least, having not necessarily experienced other police forces, that we get a much higher level of service here in Takoma Park. Now, that said, I am very, very pleased to see that we are now integrating mental health counselors and others into the police force, you know, as hopefully is happening at least in progressive cities around the country. I have actually stopped a man from choking a woman right in front of my house, and 3 very nice Takoma Park police officers came out, didn't have a woman on staff, nor did they have a mental health counselor. We could have saved a lot of money had we had those kinds of people, I think. I mean, they are also expensive, but had we had the right people for the task at hand. And so I'm not sure. I think this is going to require a lot of analysis. I think we need to consider, you know, how the ARPA dollars are being used to help the police force as well. But I know that we need to find that right balance of police and mental health and efficiency. I also do see a lot of police officers come out for each and every call, which sometimes, honestly, does concern me, like 9 police officers for a single incident.
Thank you, and apologies for the poorly worded question. AJ, what are your thoughts on the Tacoma Park Police Force? Are we getting what we need out of the Tacoma Park Police?
Well, if we didn't have the Tacoma Park Police, I mean, there was a time when we didn't have them, and we get faster service, better service by having our own police force. the police force is something we should really talk about. I think we have too many police for a city this size. The reason we have a larger police force is because we're at cross jurisdictions, so a lot of crime incidents that happen in DC tend to end up in Takoma Park, things, car robberies, that sort of thing. We get $4 million a year in transfers to our budget. So, I mean, it costs us, but kind of worth it. I mean, I'd like to see it perhaps a little bit smaller.
Thank you. Yared?
Yes, I think I touched on this earlier, but back to at the Essex. I was talking to some of the constituents there, and a large concern they had was that they didn't feel safe when it came to regards to their parking lots. There are people keying cars, packages are being stolen. There's a consistent theme of people wanting security cameras, some form of protection over their homes, so to speak. So I think especially when it comes with regards to the apartments, we could definitely be doing better. There are multiple instances I could list off. There was a shooting in front of one, in fact, nearby the Maple Marketplace. I think that with regards to the police, we would have to look in and see how exactly things are structured, but in general, there are definite places we can improve. And on the note that Ms. Honzak brought up, I too very much approve of diversifying who our emergency responders are. Police shouldn't be an all-for-one shoe. I think that mental health support is a very important thing, and we should be looking into more creative solutions to various incidents that could and will happen.
Thank you. Cara, anything you'd like to add? AJ?
Well, the problem with the crisis counselors that we'll be hiring to work in conjunction with the police department, there's 2 of them on a 24-hour rotation. We just don't have enough of them, and all the money is coming from ARPA funding. So after 2 years, it all goes away. I don't know if there's interest in expanding the police force permanently by 2 people, even though we're not technically a police force. There's employees or city contract employees, I think. I don't see them in terms of sticking around. I think we're going to like it, but I don't think we're going to have the need that we think we do. So.
Thank you. Any question? Where are we at? AJ, I believe. Tacoma Park is bypassed by state highways, and so it's never going to be able to end traffic. But what can you do as a city council member to encourage car-free living in the city, walkability, bikeability, and better use of public transportation?
I want to add a circulator. I want to have an interward circulator that brings people from the narrow streets that we can't get big buses into the downtown city centers. And I want it to be, well, the original plan was to have it an AI-driven electric vehicle, but the budget for that would be incredible. I tried to bring it to the city. Yared tried to bring it to the city. Nobody would listen, not even close. Even when we identified sources of funding and a university grant that would help defray the cost, state money that would help defray the cost. 2 electric roving circulators could take you from your house down to a restaurant and back again without having to call an Uber. The co-op could or restaurants could put food on it and have it delivered to your house or nearby your house. A lot of people who live, like say in the middle of Ward 6, don't have access to a bus without walking to a main street. Parts of, less so in Ward 5 because we have buses, but yeah, that's what I wanted to do. You get shut out of these discussions a lot around here. Like great ideas come to die at Maple Avenue.
Thank you. Yared, what are your thoughts on how we could improve car-free transportation in Takoma Park?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a well-researched answer for you at the moment, but I would say that ultimately it would be a matter of looking at areas where people don't have access to good transportation, and also looking at areas where there isn't really, quote-unquote, much to do, and focusing on a dual approach of A, creating means of more bus routes perhaps, or the hypothetical circulator, and B, making sure that those areas have the amenities that they would need, so to speak.
Thank you. Cara?
Yeah, I heard in the previous forum, someone's found the same statistic I did. I was actually quite surprised to see that in Tacoma Park we have an average of 2 cars per household in Tacoma Park. That's a lot. And I mean, that also probably speaks to multi-generation families, but it is a lot. So I would say we really need to look at what are the most cost-efficient ways, and I haven't done that research myself yet. It may be out there already. But one of the things that's coming up a lot in our ward, and this is really for the moment, honestly, it's mostly related to higher income people, and that's not where our focus should be, but it might be one of the cheaper options is to increase bike lane safety to key corridors that people are using regularly. We have the Sligo Creek corridor, but do we have corridors, let's say, that are safe to get from our side of the ward over to the schools like Rolling Terrace? Do we have a safe corridor once you get across Wayne Avenue up to Silver Spring International Middle School? And again, that's a little bit outside of the city, but things we can do. Could we find a way to meet equity needs and bike lane safety on Maple Avenue to get our ward all the way up to Old Town and allow people to use the co-op with their electric bicycles more comfortably and bring groceries home again? Just for example, those are some things that I've seen that could be lower hanging fruits. And then I really support the idea, Yared also, like said, has talked about the circulator, but maybe even just a shuttle that can come up and down like a Flower Avenue corridor to get to Giant and Bestway and the shops down there, for example, would go a long way.
Okay. Any other thoughts, AJ? Okay. Yared, I am not, this is just by happenstance, but my next question is young people have had a tough couple of years and even tougher for some than others. Many are lagging academically. National statistics suggest that the rate of depression are higher among young people than previously. Does the city have a role in assisting young residents? And if so, what do you propose?
I believe that the youth of our city are important. I believe that was my personal stance on when it comes to education is that it's not just in the school, it's your whole life. I believe when it comes to supporting the youth, the best thing we can do is really engaging them, making sure that they have a robust extracurricular life, and I'll be in the interest of supporting after-school care programs, even on a very simple, bare-bones community level. For instance, just supporting parents who are setting up these after-school programs for kids to do homeworks, kids to play together, kids to work together, just very simple things. It takes a village to raise a child, so to speak, and building community is a good way to support the kids as well.
Thank you. Cara?
Yeah, this touches on an issue that is very close to my heart. I have seen too much of the haves and the have-nots in the schools, that we're looking at major disparities when it comes to what happens after school. And it's pay to play in all of our schools. It took me a lot of years to wrap my head around that. By the time you get to high school, our kids who have had a lot of money growing up are able to do the athletics at the schools, while those who haven't don't even have an entryway. It's outrageous. And so what we should be doing here in our city is somehow we've got to be really creative to use, the funding that we have to find ways to either, pay for slots for kids to be in the already existing programs that don't have a space already, and make sure they're in the same programs with the haves, if you will, but those high quality programs that already exist, and then help to launch, swimming lessons after school, for example, at our local indoor pool. And people who can support those programs. I know it takes a lot of money, but we need more of that. And I'm happy to see the county is addressing some of the tutoring needs now, but maybe we could provide chaperones so more of that can happen after school or something like that. We've got to do something about the educational disparity. It's atrocious right now. The data, if anybody hasn't seen it, is appalling. And after-school programming is definitely a pathway to improve mental health.
Thank you. AJ?
The opposite of depression is not happiness. It's connection. It's connecting to other people. It's seeing their worth and their value. It's feeling like you belong. I certainly have suffered from depression in my life. I've been suicidal at times, and we have to be able to talk about that. Tacoma Park has been incredibly fractured recently. Not to name any parking lots, but we need to come together, and we have to do it for our kids, but we also have to do it for ourselves. We need more places of connection, more points of connection, more times when we're not talking to each other over our keyboards. We need real face-to-face time, and our kids need it even more. Nothing will change, nothing we do academically will ever change unless we get them connected, and to make them feel seen and appreciated.
Thank you. We are drawing close to the end of our time together. In the spirit of, drawing distinctions among the three of you, I'm interested in hearing from each of you about what experience in your life has best prepared you for taking a council seat. And Cara, I believe you're up first.
Well, I have spent really most of my life engaging with people who I feel I can serve as an interlocutor, and I think that is what I most bring. I don't know if it's unique here, but it's my strongest trait that I have to offer to our community of great diversity. It is what I do for a living. It is what I do passionately. I love to engage people, and I come from a place where we do say good morning every day, and that is one of the things people like to engage with me on. I humbly say, but I like doing it, and I like serving people in that way, and meeting people where they're at. So I will work with everyone across my neighborhood to speak their language, to find people to work with me who will speak people's language. And I don't just mean an actual language, I mean the cultural language that each group of people speaks, and the way they need to hear it. And I am ready to hear, too, I made a mistake, and that's not the way to communicate with me, and I will try to take pause. So I hope that's what I bring to the table.
Okay. AJ?
One of the things that people know about me is that I can work with anyone. Half of my family are red hat, MAGA, loving, Trump voting, gun toting, I want to say Republicans, but maybe that word's not sufficient anymore. And my part of the family is uber progressive, feminist, empowering, pro-choice, liberal, woke folks. And we still get to sit down over Thanksgiving dinner, and we still talk, and I have the ability to listen to somebody who intensely disagrees with me and to not try to convince them, but just to listen to them. And that's, I guess, what I bring to the table. We're not going to all agree, and God knows in Takoma Park we don't agree on much. But we have some shared values, and focusing on that will help.
Okay, thank you. Yared?
So for starters, Ms. Campbell, I'd love to talk with you more, and I'm just out of curiosity here what it's like having that split dichotomy between your family. It's a personal curiosity of mine.
It actually, we have a very strict no gunplay before pie on Thanksgiving. Absolutely no guns will be displayed until after pumpkin pie. And I'm telling you, I'm not joking about that, but everybody thinks I am.
No, it sounds believable. That's why I was curious.
From
It must
Texas,
make
so
a
it
lot of good
doesn't surprise
stories
me too
there.
much.
But I'm on timer, so let's get to the actual point.
You've been on pause, Yared.
All right. The question: why me? Well, I would say what I bring to the table is perspective. Really, I mean, I was born and raised, or raised in Essex House. I was in the shadow of local activism on account of Tebabu Sufa over there. I've talked with all sorts of people. I said this earlier in my introduction, I believe. I've seen Tacoma Park from a whole bunch of angles, and it's been an interesting life, a unique life certainly, and bringing it forward here, while I can't deny I certainly lack the experience some of the other candidates have come here today and days prior have. I think the chief thing I have is an ability to really walk all the walks and jive all the jives. I don't know how else to put it. And if I am to be elected, I'm looking forward to really engaging with everyone and working together to find the best solutions we can for Tacoma Park.
Let me just start. Yared, if, when voters want to learn more about you, do you have
Yes,
any kind of a site we can go to?
Yared4ward5.org.
Say that again?
Yared, my name, 4ward5.org.
Okay, and Cara?
CaraForTacoma.com.
Okay.
Yes, CampbellCan.com.
Okay. Now, thank you. I feel like I preempted closing statements because, in a sense, you all already given us closing statements. But I want to give you an opportunity to provide us with closing statements. So let's go in the same order that we started. So, AJ.
I had all these notes from my opening statement that I was supposed to get in that I didn't quite run through. I volunteered on the Folk Festival for years with Colleen Clay, who's in the audience tonight, my partner in crime. I recently got Montgomery County to pass window guard legislation. That was really incredibly important. We had 2 children fall out of windows. One lived, the miracle child that fell 11 stories and lived, and then a child who sadly didn't make it, who fell out of a 3-story window because they didn't have window guards, because we didn't require window guards. The city didn't act after the first time the child fell, and the city didn't act after the second time a child fell. So after trying to get something through the city council, I went to the county and worked with Tom Hucker, built a coalition of interested parties, and got the regulation passed. So now every rental in the city in Montgomery County has to have a window guard. If they, under certain conditions, the child has to be under 10, and that has to be their residence. But there's that, and so we can change things. We just have to fight for it. And one of the things I do best is fight. You know, passionate about what I do, maybe to my detriment sometimes, but I'm pretty effective. Point me in the direction you want, and I'll go get it for you. And I will definitely fight for the people in the city who don't have a lot of voice. You know, I've been rich, flying high as a consultant for Merrill Lynch, and poor and desperate. And I would never judge anybody, and I would always make sure I helped if I could.
Thank you, AJ. Cara?
I want to applaud you for the window guards, by the way. I just think it's one of the most wonderful things that was done that affected our ward in particular and all the people that need that. I guess what I think I would like to earn the trust of the folks in Ward 5. I know a lot of you. You don't necessarily know me as a city representative yet. I believe I will earn your trust. I have heard you loud and clear about our communication needs because I share them. I've been here for 20 years and I feel exactly the same way. I am a collaborator. I want to see us heal some of the deep wounds that have been created, and they are very much alive, unfortunately, even in our ward. We are not always going to agree, but we can do much, much better if we are focused on being positive before negative, if we are focused on win-win solutions, and if we are focused on building consensus that is truly participatory. And I commit myself to doing that to the greatest degree possible and using all my professional experience and skills to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Yared?
So I believe I've already said my piece on things, so to speak. So I'd like to take a bit of an unconventional approach. Which camera should I look at?
They'll catch you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
To you, the voter, to you, the viewer, whoever's watching this, the most important thing, no matter who you pick among us, you have to participate in the system. Big things are happening, and without you, your we're not going to be able to properly represent you. The one thing I want to come across at the end of this is that for government to work, we really do need the people. It's for the people, by the people, of the people. And I would hope that not only now, but in the future, that you work yourself to participate and that you bring in as many people as you can. And if we work together, no matter how things go, I think the ideal situation I keep referring to will come to pass. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yared, and thank all three of you candidates, A.J. Campbell, Cara, Honzak, and again, Yared, Tebabu. And as we are closing, I want to always make sure to thank Tacoma Park City Clerk Jesse Carpenter and the folks at Tacoma TV who are diligently staying up and preserving this for YouTube. So Bienvenido Martinez and Alvaro Calabia. Sorry for mangling your name, Alvaro. And one thing I'm finding really interesting in these conversations, just to have my final word here, is not just a chance to meet the different candidates, but also to meet the different wards of the city. And within the 2.5 square miles of Tacoma Park, it's just amazing the variety of experience. So, I thank all three of you for coming here this evening and bringing those concerns to the city. Thank you.